Hey everyone, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, joined by columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you from Memorial Stadium after Indiana's 38-10 win over Ball State. Closes the non-conference season for Indiana, 3-0 start, exactly what Indiana needed. Not just what they wanted, but absolutely what they needed. Coming out of the gates here this season, Big Ten season on the horizon begins next week against Michigan State. But really, when you came into the season, you looked at these first three games to really achieve everything this team wanted to and aspired to achieve this year. The margins are always so slim for Indiana football, but especially with this kind of non-conference schedule, winnable, navigable, you really had to win all three games. They did just that, and they did it all in a fashion I think kind of built to this point and builds into Big Ten season.
They did, and I don't know, maybe it just circumstances conspired in the right way for Indiana in this particular case. I think, going down to FIU for that opener in Miami, that was a really big question mark, just what you were going to get, not knowing what this team is, not knowing what that team is, and just knowing that openers are weird things in and of themselves. But they got through that one, obviously got through the monsoon last week, which is not really on anybody's regular docket. And so in a lot of ways, you get to this third game, and for Indiana, it sort of felt like an opener in a way, because it was like the first game at home in good weather at noon, all those things going on, and with Ball State coming in, having played Notre Dame so well last week, obviously they had Indiana's attention. And so for a rare time, I guess, in Indiana football, circumstances conspired in the right way to help Indiana get off to this 3-0 start.
No, you're absolutely right. Coming off that game, it was honestly outside of Stevie Scott, which was impressive in any conditions. The fact that he did it in a monsoon was 100% even more so. But it was so hard to really take anything grand from that game and really apply it forward. But this, like you said, coming out against a Ball State team that gave Notre Dame some troubles last week in South Bend, or at least went out there and played like a team with nothing to lose. You were kind of curious what you'd get on the Ball State end as well, but really when you look at all three phases, Indiana was really decisive in all three, especially offensively. Special teams was impressive, both in terms of punt block, you had a nice punt return from Jason Harris, and defensively too. The fact that they gave up some yards, but largely if it wasn't bend don't break, they were just able to keep Ball State in front of them for much of the day. Right. Really effective on third down. I think they were 4 for 14. I don't have it exactly in front of me, but. They made the plays they had to make when they needed to. It was as simple as that. I mean, for a young defense, for a defense that actually got a lot of guys into action today, young guys at that. Once again, I just think it was a really complete and impressive and frankly convincing performance against a team like this.
Yeah, it definitely was. And just looking at it from an offensive standpoint now, so Indiana put up 38 at FIU, put up 20 in the rain last week, another 38 today. I think given where we were at coming into this season, not knowing quite how this offense was going to work, not knowing who the quarterback was going to be, not knowing who the running back was going to be, especially once Morgan Ellison got suspended. I think the production offensively has been everything you'd hope for and maybe then some from this team to this point.
I certainly think the latter. I think we're honestly getting a little bit more than maybe we expected from this offense. I wasn't sold. I wasn't buying into necessarily all the talk about the offensive line, just the fact that everyone returned. I still wasn't convinced last season that, or even that, coming into the season, that they'd be the physical line that they need to be. Whether they are in the Big Ten, that remains to be seen. I still need to see a lot more. But it's hard to argue with any of these results that we've gotten through these first three games. To have Stevie Scott back up his 200-yard performance with 100 more convincing yards this week, including 2 touchdowns. To have Peyton Ramsey respond, I think he completed only 2 of his first 6 passes, completed 18 of his last 19 heading into halftime. He's backing up the confidence Tom Allen had in him, coming out of the preseason. And I still think there's more for this offense to unlock. I mean, Nick Westbrook hasn't really got going at all. Walt Phillier has kind of been lost in a shuffle of. I think we're seeing a few more options on this offense than maybe we first envisioned, because in fall camp, Walt Phillier was the most impressive player in camp. I mean, he was making plays every day. Westbrook, he looked the part of Nick Westbrook from 2 years ago, and yet it's other guys stepping up. It's Luke Timian being steady. It's Ty Freifogel being that steady guy on the outside. I think there's still even more potential to unlock with this Indiana offense, and that's also going back to what I said earlier. It's assuming that the offensive line does translate to Big Ten play, and some of the other things carry over as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I think one thing that'll be interesting, you mentioned going into Big Ten play, what Indiana's done through these first 3 games is rotate a lot of guys in and out, both offensively and defensively. But offensively, certainly that's the case. It seems like you get a different set of receivers every time out there. I think they started today with Whop Philyor, Nick Westbrook, maybe even Reese Taylor was out there a little bit. Then the next drive, Donovan Hale comes in, Luke Timian comes in. Next drive, Fryfogel's in. It's just kind of everybody's kind of getting their turn and getting their feet wet, and maybe to a certain extent that's why you haven't seen Whop Philyor, Donovan Hale, Nick Westbrook, any of those guys just go off with a big game per se, because just everybody's getting their shot and contributing a little bit here and there on these drives. Reese Taylor, you've got the freshman running backs today. You got Ronnie Walker into the mix as a true freshman running back. And to me, that's really what I thought was the story of this game, and really to the non-conference slate to this point, is the number of freshmen, both true freshmen and redshirt freshmen, that Indiana's getting into games and getting experience and really building some depth and building some confidence heading into the Big Ten season. I think those rotations could very well tighten up, shorten up. You may not see a lot of these guys, especially with the 4-game redshirt rule. I think they'll be a little more judicious with their use of these guys in the Big Ten season. But so far, they're giving everybody a chance and really finding out what guys can and can't do for this team.
Definitely so, and I think that we're starting to see a little bit more as far as Reese Taylor. He's a guy who's he's going to play all season. I think that's pretty clear at this point. Got him into the offense in various different roles. Had him outside, had him in the slot, had him in the backfield today. So his role continues to expand. He was just a guy who, given his skill set, wasn't a fit for the weather conditions, I think, last week. But I think today you probably saw a little bit more of what they had planned and what they hope to do with him. You got Michael Penix back in action. That's important moving forward, just to kind of give him that foundation that he can maybe rely on if he is needed in a larger role moving forward.
And I think it's fair to ask at this point, we're 3 games in. Penix has appeared in 2 of those 3 games. If he's going to redshirt this year, he can only appear in 2 more games. Now, I think you and I would both agree that the likelihood that he redshirts this year is, not very high. Yeah, very minimal. But that's still an option that's available to Indiana should Ramsey be able to continue to play at the level he's played so far, and you opt to stick with the hot hand. I'm guessing next week against Michigan State, if Peyton Ramsey's 20 of 25 in the first half, going into the second half, they're probably not going to be so eager to stick Michael Penix in the game. That's going to be something they're only going to do if the offense gets bogged down, if Ramsey throws a couple of picks and it's just having an off night, those kind of things. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out the rest of this season. Do they concern themselves with that at all, or do they just kind of freely use Penix, even if it's just 1 series a game, just to change things up and give teams a different look?
If he's going to be your backup, he's got to be ready to play, so that kind of goes into it as well. Originally Tom Allen had said, with these first 3 non-conference games, it would be ideal to get him in maybe 2 and then bank 2 for later in the year. Well, he's got 2 more to bank, but at the same time, just given what he is and the upside there, it almost seems like maybe you do work him in here situationally going forward. But right now, it's hard to argue with anything Peyton Ramsey's doing. There are certainly moments where you question some decisions and maybe you want it to be a little bit more crisp. But, by and large, it's hard to argue with 75% of his passes this season have been completed. So, he was the smart choice coming out of fall camp, just given where Indiana stood, where they were going, and who they had. And he's backed that up here 3 games in. What else do we have to touch on today, Jeremy?
Well, I think defensively, the thing we probably want to look at is, the bend but don't break approach of the Indiana defense today. Gave up a field goal on the opening drive, not unlike the Virginia game last week where Virginia goes down and gets that touchdown. But then Indiana seemed to make some adjustments. Like you mentioned earlier, started getting off the field on 3rd down, obviously was huge. And that's the adjustment part, I think, is something that's become commonplace in the Tom Allen era. I think we've seen that he's really good at making adjustments, whether it's from opening drive to drive, first quarter to second quarter, first half to second half. That's something the Indiana defense has done in the last couple of years, is make those adjustments and get better. And obviously there's still room for that defense to improve. But again, just like the offense, you were rotating so many guys. I think they had 3 different linebacker groups running in there at times. You've got a good 2.5 different secondary groups running in there. You've got 2-3 layers of defensive linemen running in there. Again, that's something that might tighten up in a closer game in Big Ten season. But you've got a lot of guys that have gotten a lot of playing time in these first 3 games, giving them some options if they need those should injuries occur down the road.
Yeah, no, it's been really interesting, especially to kind of go back to one of your previous points, to watch this freshman class. I mean, some of these guys that are rotating on the field, it's important baseline experience. Guys like Jalen Williams, James Head had a really good game up front. Just there's a lot of Micah McFadden continues to surface in moments here and there. A guy who, if you would ask probably just about anybody, even inside the program, as far as likely redshirt candidates, guys they maybe weren't expecting much from this year, offensive linemen, aside. Micah McFadden's probably the one, but he continues to service in key moments. But yeah, no, there's been a lot of movement. There's been a lot of different guys, and I think your line and your story kind of sums it up. It bodes well for the next game and bodes well for next year as well. So there's that to look forward to within the immediate 3-game 3-0 start.
You mentioned James Head. That's a guy that's not going to be redshirting this season unless there's an injury or something. I mean,
and that's what it was originally. He was injured. Otherwise, he would have been out to the first game, and more so last week too.
Yeah, really impressive looking guy. I mean, a defensive end, and they were using him as a spy on Ball State quarterback Riley Neal because he's got that kind of speed to chase him down. The rest of the time, I think mostly it was the linebackers who were doing that spy job, but at times they used Head at that defensive end spot and then had him drop and play that spy role. Really impressive looking young guy going forward.
Physical specimen, really. I remember seeing him for the first time in spring practice. He's wearing that number 6. I'm thinking, man, is Kemion Patrick back like 3 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, if that's even possible? I mean, he's just a really big, developed dude for a freshman. Honestly, if you go back to spring ball, he was one of the better looking guys they had up front, just in terms of just physical, athleticism, just body types. And he's kind of what you want. If you're trying to build a Big Ten line. So really encouraging to see from him. Got to check on Gavin Everett. I don't think he was out there at all today. I think he was wearing a brace, which opened a door for James Head today. But that's kind of the guy you're projecting there in the future, both in terms of this season and beyond. So to have him have a game like this against Ball State, where you would hope he would potentially have this kind of upside against the MAC opponent, was definitely one of the many positive signs for Indiana to take into next week and Big Ten season at large.
Next up, a chance to go 4-0, which is rare air in the Indiana football program.
Especially when you're counting a Big Ten win among them to start the year. It's
something they last did in 2015. Before that, they last did it in 1990. I went back through the record book. It's something they've only done 7 times ever, start 4-0. So definitely a chance to get there, and against a Michigan State team that has been, how should we put it, underwhelming so far this year.
Yeah. No, I just with this team, it's impressive in the sense that entering that FIU game, going back, we may have touched on this, but really didn't know what to expect from this Indiana team, and the fact that they were able to get all 3, the way they were able to build off of each one, and just the fact that beyond everything else, I just think it's a team that's really been playing hard. Even through some of the lulls they've had in games, it just seems like a team that both plays hard and is capable of bouncing back, rebounding within games, adjusting, as you said earlier. So really encouraging day here at Memorial Stadium, really encouraging non-conference season as a whole. Second season begins next Saturday night here at Memorial Stadium. Like you said, it'll be an interesting game, seeing what this Michigan State team looks like coming in here and what Indiana looks like against a team from their own conference. So with that, we went way too long, but thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.